welcome everybody to our ECOP Next Generation Extension Learning for Leaders webinar. Pleased that you're all able to spend some time with us today, and thanks to everyone who participated in our inaugural webinar on leadership opportunities for extension directors and administrators to make a difference with the opioid epidemic. That was facilitated by Chris Borboom and company, and archived on the ECOP Monday Minute blog. And by the way, all of these webinars are being archived on the ECOP Monday Minute blog. And so if you miss one, go there, or if there's others in your organization who would like to view, we would certainly invite them to go there as well. As we go through our webinar today, we do have 5 panelists, and so if you have questions or comments as we go through the program, you're welcome to post in the chat. If you've not done that before, there's a little chat icon typically at the bottom of your screen. You can click on that and open the chat pod and take advantage of that. So for our webinar for January, we just thought as we start a new year, that it would be fun and interesting to engage with 5 of our peers. We've asked our panel members to each provide 2 of their best and biggest ideas to invite all of us to think differently about extension, cooperative extension, the work we do going forward, and to help us maybe stretch our mind a little bit about some ideas or some opportunities. Our panel members were very gracious. In fact, when I invited them, they all said yes. That's always a fun response to get. And we will be going in this order for their remarks. So we'll start with Brian Higginbotham, Associate Vice President for Extension at Utah State University, followed by Laura Perry Johnson, Associate Dean for Extension, soon to be National Champion, University of Georgia. How about that, huh? Setting you up. And then third will be Debbie Sheely, Associate Dean of Extension, University of Rhode Island. Marshall Stewart, Vice Chancellor for Extension and Engagement, University of Missouri. And then Carolyn Williams, Associate Administrator for Extension, Prairie View A&M University. And so thank you to all of our panel members for your willingness to participate with us today. We very much look forward to your remarks. I think what we'll do is give all 5 an opportunity to say what they wanted to share with us, and when they're finished, then we'll open it up for conversation. But as I mentioned earlier, if you have comments or questions as we go along, feel free to type in the chat, and you can then log those, and we will get to those comments and questions. So I think at this point, Brian, we are ready for you to begin.
Okay, well, hello everybody, and thank you, Chuck, for the opportunity. We were asked to talk about ways to think differently about extension, and the 2 that I will highlight, I'll begin with the first, that we've really tried, under the direction of my vice president, to think differently about our employees, in the sense that we work for them rather than they work for us. And one of the ways that we put that into practice is to be more flexible in the type of FTE distribution that they have with extension. And so for a lot of the faculty who have been at Utah State for many years, they were hired as 12-month employees. And, you know, over the years, they have become very successful in writing grants, and aren't able to benefit from that because our extra service compensation policies here at the university have been really restricted. And so we have increasingly allowed them to convert to an 11-month appointment or a 10-month. We usually don't go any farther than an 80% FTE. And because we are already paying them full amount, we've allowed them to keep that full amount and just take it in 10 installments instead of 12. We're not out anything, but what it does is it frees up, you know, 2 months or 20% of their FTE that they can use to write grants and to benefit personally. We've also begun to do that to varying degrees with new hires, particularly where they may be at another location and we don't have enough money to really make it all super attractive for them to come, we can say, well, we can give you what we can in, you know, a reduced amount of time, and then puts the onus on them to make up the difference. But the difference would then put them over and beyond what they're able to get at their current location. The other idea that we have pursued pretty aggressively the last couple years is being more purposeful with our state agencies in being a service provider for them, rather than just a partner who comes to their advisory boards and, you know, is helpful when asked. We've gone to them and said, look, you are involved in certifying this or administering this program. How about we help you do that? And a lot of times they, you know, they're operating off of old technology or pen and paper type of tests. And we're able to say, look, we already have the infrastructure, the technology to put this into an e-course or whatever else they want it to be. And it's worked out really good. In the last year, we've gotten contracts from the Administrative Office of the Courts to administer all of the divorce education courses that are required for everybody divorcing in our state. And so we're now serving anywhere from 500 to 600 people a month, and processing those, you know, doing the courses for them online and then giving them the certificates of completion. With the Department of Agriculture, we're now doing the pesticide applicators CEU or trainings, and we also do the food handler permit certification for the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Health. We've got a couple other things in the works too, but we've just thought a little bit differently about those partnerships, not just in being partners, but they are our clients, and that we can become contracted by them to actually help fulfill some of their mandates. I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thank you very much, Brian. Two really interesting examples. Laura, you're up next.
Okay, thank you. Happy New Year to everyone. The two ideas that I had centered around how we deliver information and who we deliver it to, and then the idea of how we tell people who we are, public relations and communications, how we let people know who we are and what we do. So as far as on how we deliver our programs, we have traditionally been known for the relationships we build. We're very high touch, and that's what makes us unique, and that's what makes us good. So how do we continue to do that and maintain that high touch and that personal relationship building when there are so many more people to touch and so many more, we're spread so thin. So I think it makes us be in a position of where we have to be really still a bit traditional on the way we deliver our programs and we build relationships, but very transformational and always thinking about how we do that in a new and innovative way. People these days want to utilize technology, but we still have a segment of clientele that wants to get a paper newsletter. So we have to look at that dichotomy and see how we fit into that. And we're never going to build our capacity or continue to build the capacity as much as we need to if we don't utilize some of that technology. But I think we have to really think out of the box and figure out how we bring in that technology but still maintain that personal touch. There is obviously more and more population, and so the problem is there aren't more and more of us, so we've got to figure out how to touch a larger population with either the same or a smaller workforce. So I think that how we deliver information and still maintain those parts of extension that are what make us great and what make us unique, I think that's going to be something that we're going to have to figure out in order to continue to grow. As far as on the second thought, how do people know about us? How do they know what we do? I can tell you that I get so sick of hearing that we are the best kept secret around, because everyone says that. And the thing is, if we're that great, why don't more people know about us? You know, I'm from a rural town in South Georgia, and I guarantee you, if you go and stand outside of the grocery store or the Walmart and ask 20 people, you're going to find people in a rural South Georgia town that don't know who Extension is or what services we offer. I mean, and that's certainly true in our urban areas. So somehow or another, we've got to get the message out on the programs and the services we offer. You know, if I had a magic wand, I would like to be able to create a scenario where we let people know we're the unbiased, research-based Google of the world. So, you know, come Google us, but we actually have research behind the information that we're going to give you. When you think about how you do this, you have to figure out how to get down to a small enough segment that you're in a sphere of influence that it's in a small enough segment that people can find people that know what you do. For us in Georgia, we have 159 counties, and for a long time that worked because counties were small enough you could get to know the county agent. People knew what services we had to offer. But as populations grow, that doesn't work anymore. So you've got to move it down to a community level or to a neighborhood level where people can actually have some firsthand knowledge of some of the programs that we do. So how can we do this? Can we do it individually in our states or in our counties, or can we do this collectively across the whole United States? And that's part of what the task force looked at last year when we were looking at, you know, pooling our resources so that we had a brand that we could go maybe after collective projects. So I think that it's something that really bears thinking about. I think the diversity we have within states, within counties, within programs, and certainly across states and across the nation is our biggest asset because we can morph our programs to suit those local needs. But that also makes it real complicated to do something collectively because we're not the same everywhere. So I think our diversity is our biggest asset, but it's also very challenging when we try to work together to do something as a system. So I think in closing, I would just say that these are two things I grapple with thinking about a lot. There is certainly no silver bullet. I don't think there's any magic answer that is going to, you know, change things tomorrow. I think if I could put up a graphic right now, I'd put up an elephant because I think it's more like eating an elephant. You just have to do it a little bit at a time, and you have to keep pressing forward and trying not to lose ground.
Great. Thank you, Laura, very much. Two more challenging ideas for us to think about. So Debbie Sheely from the middle of a Eastern Shore snowstorm, or maybe it's getting better. Debbie, it's all yours.
My internet has been kind of blinking out on me a little. I hope it doesn't happen during my presentation. So anyway, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to share a couple of ideas from the Ocean State. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about Rhode Island to set the stage. It's a tiny state with a little over 1,000 square miles in area, about 40 miles of coastline, and we have a population of about 1 million people, so it's pretty densely populated. We are primarily urban and suburban with a vibrant food and agriculture sector. We face really a typical set of societal issues and needs, just like you would find in most states, and in which extension would tend to be involved. Food and agriculture, protection of natural resources, community and economic vitality, food safety, healthy lifestyles, obesity prevention, and the list goes on and on. So, you know, it's a really broad portfolio of needs for our little state. Now, we try to address all of those needs with just over $1 million in Smith-Lever funding each year. We receive no cash match from the state of Rhode Island, and we receive no county support. So resources are pretty tight. Now, I don't tell you this so that you feel sorry for me. I just wanted to set the stage for my two ideas. Okay, first idea. So I contend that from state to state, the demands on extension are more similar than different. However, the capacity to address those demands differs wildly. Smaller states and smaller institutions are expected to address a wide variety of issues for their clientele, but they often have only a single person or sometimes no one at all working in a particular area. So although the magnitude of demand on extension is certainly higher in bigger states with more people, the diversity of needs is really much more similar. This disparity in capacity deserves careful consideration at the national level when setting policy or designing new programs. So that's idea number one. Second idea I'll share with you is a strategy that we've begun using here in Rhode Island to address some of this limited capacity. And what we're using is, it's what I think of as a unique combination of partnership and coordination. So partnership is, of course, critical when resources are limited, and coordination is important when you have multiple entities working on a problem or an issue. In Rhode Island, we have a large number of small organizations partnering and working diligently to serve the needs of our state. Groups like state and local government, conservation districts, land trusts, producer organizations, philanthropic organizations, and cooperative extension, of course. In Rhode Island, we can partner and coordinate on a whole state level without the need for much formal structure and operate in a really somewhat loose and flexible manner as we work together. For example, Dr. Ken Payne, a Rhode Island economic development expert, periodically brings together all relevant parties to discuss an agricultural issue and then to produce a white paper for future reference by the parties. There is no expectation that anyone will change what they're already doing or invest their limited resources in something new because of their participation in the process. The main value in coming together is to create a shared sense of common and mutually reinforcing purpose. It's actually really empowering for everyone and can result over time in real change because it helps everyone understand how what they do contributes to a common goal for the state. You might even call this a stone soup strategy after the children's fable, because everyone brings what they can to the table or to the soup kettle to create something really quite meaningful. So to wrap up, I'll just summarize my two ideas. Again, number one, across states, demands on extension are more similar than different, but capacity differs a lot. This deserves careful consideration at the national level. A stone soup, and then second, a stone soup sort of strategy can result in change by creating a sense of shared purpose among discrete organizations. This works most effectively when you can identify and convene all key players, which can realistically be done in a small state like Rhode Island. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Marshall, you're up next.
All right. Well, thank you, Chuck, and it's good to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity. The two ideas that I bring forth, really, I think, to me, I guess I'll say this as sort of an introduction, are really shaped by probably where I sit today more than anything else. The way we're structured at the University of Missouri, I serve as Vice Chancellor of Extension and Engagement, so therefore have purview of the entire institution, which is a little bit different than what you may find in many states. It's different than anything I had ever experienced, but it has also been very revealing and very exciting to sit at that table and to see some things. So I said that as sort of, I guess, sort of the groundwork to say these things. I think the two issues that to me really are compelling are, number one, the idea of university-wide engagement. And I'll talk about that for a few moments. And then second, the second issue I really think is important for those of us who still work with cooperative extension, as I do. I have both in my portfolio, university engagement and extension, is the sort of the horizon of federal extension capacity funds and what that's going to mean for us in the long term. So let's talk about engagement for a couple minutes. I think that the timing's right for us to seize this. Higher education is under attack, as it's probably never been in my lifetime. Relevance is being questioned. There's a real focus in many universities to be more state and regionally or nationally focused and internationally focused. And quite frankly, the public is questioning the value of it. Is it really worth what they've invested? And that's being driven by a couple things. One is, I think, the trend that baby boomers today are not as invested in an education as they once were, because we've all gotten older. And now I'm not saying that about us individually, but as a collective body, that's definitely true. And rural America really feels like it's been left out. And that is our constituency base. And when you look at where we've gotten our funding and our support for what we've done in the past and in higher education, particularly in our space. So the conditions are really good for us to think about university engagement. And if you look at the landscape today, you see that land-grant universities oftentimes have an Office of Engagement that's separate from Extension, which I think is a real warning sign for us. And many of you face that. I also think if you look at non-land-grant universities and you look at private institutions, and you look at what are they doing differently today than say they were 25 years ago, it is engagement. It's probably engagement and distance education are the two things you'll find, online learning, et cetera. But the idea of engagement is true. If you can go to Duke University, Stanford, University of Chicago, you can go to Harvard, and you'll see engagement on their website. And they're, quite frankly, in many ways, I think, eating our lunch. They've taken our playbook, and they're doing it extremely well, in particular with what Laura talked about in new ways of delivery. They're going after it. So, and we see it populated things like APLU now, where they have interest groups around engagement. And if you go in that room, you really don't see that many extension people in the room. It's mostly those in university engagement folks. So I think the considerations we have to think about with this is, how do we tie our cooperative extension work with that engagement portfolio? How do we tie that together so that we can truly leverage the systems we have for the whole university? If we really want to be at that level, we also have to become part of the metrics of measuring success in a university. Right now, research and teaching, SAT scores, ACT scores, et cetera, are measured. We need to figure out a way for extension and engagement to be a part of that mix of the metrics of ranking universities. So again, I think this idea of engagement is something that's really there for the taking, if we can be smart and think about how to do it as a collective body and extension. The second one deals with federal extension funds and capacity funds in particular. I will be very candid with you. I think the end is out there somewhere. I think there will be a day, because of just the nexus of, again, these baby boomers and the rural folks feeling like they're overlooked and how they vote now. I think you're going to see our funding, capacity fundings, whether it's Smith-Lever or Hatch funds or any funds, come under greater attack. I think it's dangerous. And Chuck's been in some meetings here recently with me where I think he saw some of that. And so I really think we've got to think about how we reestablish extension as part of the three-part mission of the core university. I think we've allowed for too long us to be marginalized and not be part of the core. If you're really part of the core, what it means, if you lose your Smith-Lever money, the university will figure out a way to make it up. Because they think it's so important. And we had, as leaders in extension, have to figure out how to get there. We had a situation on our campus recently where the medical school took a $10 million cut for a new idea they were working on, which was really good. And the university chose to make it up. We need to be in that same place. I think we have to figure out how, again, we become part of those ranking systems, how we adjust promotion and tenure on our campuses so that the scholarship and engagement is really across all disciplines. I think we have to also leverage ourselves. If you look at the young faculty members coming in, young PhDs today, they're not interested in sitting behind a desk or a lab for 7 to 10 years to move up the ranks of professorship. They want to go and do things. They want to impact research, and that's what we are. We're applied research, real life. So I think if we are going to be, in the long term, another 100 years from now, doing good work, we're going to have to embrace this idea of figuring out a different way to fund ourselves where the university sees us as core, just as they would a school of medicine or anything else. So I'll stop there, Chuck. I think I've stirred up enough trouble, and I'll stop there and listen to the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Marshall. Carolyn Williams, you're batting cleanup for us, so it's all yours.
I see. Thank you, and Happy New Year to each of you. I just feel like, despite of what the radar looks like, this is going to be an amazing year because we have amazing leaders at the RIM. But from the 1890 perspective, I wanted to address our shrinking fiscal, human and federal funding, fiscal resources, and also looking at program delivery in a totally different light. You know, when we look at the True Extension mission, it is to improve the quality of lives for people and communities. And this can only be done when we re-strategize and really focus on people, programs, and partnerships. And when I talk about people, I'm looking at our staff as well as our clientele. Our clientele has changed drastically, as has been mentioned before. We look at rural and we look at urban communities. There are so many people that need our programs, but are they really engaged in our programs? Are they even aware of our programs to get involved? So why aren't we using our very talented staff that we're hiring that are very computer and technology literate to reach out and address the concerns and needs of our clientele, especially in the underrepresented and underserved communities? We have some fabulous staff here in Texas, and I know everywhere else, that can devise different types of apps and programs to reach those that need our services the best. And as mentioned earlier, we are known for our face-to-face, one-on-one consultation. Surely that will never leave us. That is our basic foundation of how we have been successful. But how can we still meet this growing urban increase with what we have to offer? And then programs. If we do not re-strategize and repackage our programs to meet the needs, we will probably not be around for the next generation of extension. Funding is a part of the programs, and as we create new partnerships on campus in the community, that allows us leverage to be able to disseminate and promote our education programs. And I just want to use an example that we've started here. It's a homeless veterans program. We have received containers from partners, these huge containers that will be restructured by our architecture students for homeless veterans to be able to have somewhere to live so that they can receive the benefits that they have. Since we have started this project, funding has just been amazingly coming in. Texas workforce, people want to help train the students as well as others who need jobs in getting these container homes ready. And we also have land that has been donated by one of our volunteers to house them on the property. So this is a truly new way of extension work with partnerships that we never ever imagined. And all we are seeing is success and crucial impact. And then the impact component of this, you know, we submit several documents in our national database showing the impact, demonstrating the impact of extension. So why is it that the more data we submit, the less people know about us? So there's something wrong with that picture to me. We have sent so much data about extension and the impact, but we're getting less and less visible and noted and recognized for what we do. And we are here to help people in communities. So that's kind of my take on offering some new thinking differently about the generation of next extension.
Carolyn, thank you very much for your comments, and to all the panel members. So now it's open for questions or comments. I would start. There's a question in the chat directed to Marshall. Is it useful to distinguish between the scholarship of engagement and engaged scholarship? Marshall, you want to take that one on?
Sure. I think the very fact there's a question tells me yes, there is a very much an important thing for us to distinguish. And I think that the thing that I would say is those of us in this kind of realm need to grab a hold of it and define it. I think we're allowing other forces to define that around us, and whether how we want to define it, I'm not caught up in the weeds of that too deep, but I'm more about let's take charge of this and let's grab it and go, because it's going to happen. You know, one of the things I would encourage us to think about in this realm is, and I looked at this in the last year. If you go look at Tufts University, now that's a far reach from a land grant. Tufts University has an international conference on engaged scholarship. And they bring in universities from around the world. It's not just U.S. universities. If you look at that list, there are very few land grant universities included. And there's also very few universities. If you look at the list, there would be very few people that are what we call extension professionals or extensionists in that group. And that's scary to me, because that has been our, you know, wheelhouse for a long time. And we need to grab that thing. I'm just, the more I've sat in this role for the last year and a half, I thought it before, I believe it now deeper than I ever have. And this is our moment to shine. The universities in this country need what we can offer, and we need to grab it and go.
Thank you, Marshall. So comments or questions from the participants? Another question in the chat to everyone. How relevant is urban extension?
Well, Chuck, I'll take a stab at that. In Georgia, of 159 counties, basically the population growth is taking place in 6 to 9 counties. So if we can't be relevant in those urban counties, then pretty soon we won't have any support to deliver programming in the rural counties. So I think extension looks different in an urban area, but I think you can maintain those tenets of extension that serve the local clientele in the ways they need to be served. But I think that there's no way you can discount those urban clientele, because they're becoming more and more of the population. But I think we have to serve as kind of a bridge so that those urban clientele realize why it's important to serve the rural clientele, even if there aren't as many of them. I think that understanding and appreciation from both perspectives is important.
And I also think it's how we package what we have to offer, because, you know, here in Texas, the majority, as the urban areas increase, of course, the legislators are also increasing, and they are the ones who are voting on the budgets. And if we do not have our programs packaged to show the return on investment that's coming from the state, and that we are a relevant organization that's over 100 years old, we will not be as relevant as we think if we do not package our programs differently. And we have all these gifted and talented staff, and why are we not allowing them to try some things? I mean, all of us are where we are because we failed at doing some things. So as we get everybody involved, not just a select few, in helping determine our future and how we address these critical masses is very important to our success.
Any other reflections on urban extension? So another question in the chat would like to hear more about the conversion of 12-month faculty to 10 or 11 months. Specifically speak to any resistance or challenges. Brian, that one's yours.
Well, we haven't done this, universally to everybody. We do it on a case-by-case basis. For those who have been here for a while, they have to have a track record of bringing in external funding. The 10 to 15 specialists that I can think of in the last couple of years that we've done this with, have had at least 5 years of continuous funding of the size that they would be able to fill an entire month of FTE. When I first started at USU 13 years ago, we were allowed to take extra grant dollars up to 20% above and beyond our 100% salary. But many years ago, that went away. And so for a lot of these faculty that were in the same boat as me, it was like, well, I'm going to keep on working hard, but I don't get that same bump that I'm accustomed to. So, you know, everyone's thrilled who can do it. I think the resistance comes from those who only have 1 or 2 years of history, and they want it now. And we've kind of had to toe the line and say, well, you know, you've had one grant, and yeah, it's a 3-year grant, but in your last 15 years, you've really only had one large grant. And as nice as it would be to get that, you know, right now, we need to see a little bit more before we do it. Because at our university, it's very easy to reduce them down. It's hard to, you know, put them back up at the same without a corresponding salary increase. And we make this so there's no additional cost to us. It doesn't cost us a dime to reduce it, but it would if we put them back up. Because HR would expect us to have the corresponding salary dollars for that. I think the other piece of resistance comes from county faculty who have found out that we're doing a lot of this with specialists. Not a lot of it, but we're doing some of it with specialists. The county faculty have wanted to do it. The issue there is a lot of them don't bring in the same kind of grant dollars that would allow them to fill unfunded months. And then the second issue is, well, what if they don't end up getting a grant and then they're unfunded? Do they just go on vacation for a month? And what is the potential implications of that with county commissioners who notice that one of our employees isn't on the job for a month? So we have not done conversions with county faculty yet, although we have started hiring some, as I indicated, at a reduced appointment. But we go into that with the county commissioners knowing that they're only being hired, you know, for not a, you know, for a 10-month or 11-month appointment.
Thanks, Brian. There was another follow-up question about implications of elitism among successful grant getters that reduces the sense of community among other extension professionals.
You know, there might be. There hasn't been enough that it's risen to our level. In fact, I haven't had anybody come and talk to me about it, but I would guess that some of this is happening. You know, I hate to say it, but I think the next generation and the current generation of extension employees that are coming through the ranks have less of a concern about feeling like they're part of a community with the old timers. And so, you know, they want to be rewarded now for their hard work. 7 years is a long time to be awarded a raise, which is typically the only time they get a significant raise here, which is with their promotion and tenure, and then with their advancement to full. And so to us, incorporating this as part of their hire, or for those who have been successful, it is a reward mechanism, and we're hoping that everyone achieves that. I mean, if everybody wants to start writing grants and be eligible for it, that would be wonderful. But we don't want to create a culture either where we're holding some people back to kind of be at par with those who aren't working as hard.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Brian. Marshall, a question with non-LGUs, do they have a narrow scope of engagement, and does that create a competitive advantage from your perspective?
Yes, I do think it creates an advantage they have. I think they're more nimble. I think they have a lot less bureaucracy and probably tradition in some cases that we have to deal with. They also don't have the locked in stakeholder bases, which makes our change work very difficult sometimes because, and it's a good thing. I mean, they love us and they're very supportive, but they also have very specific things they think about when they think about extension. So I think anytime you deal with a non-land grant publics or or the private schools, they're going to have greater flexibility. And it's just something that, you know, we can't walk away from that though. Again, I go back that I think it's an opportunity. I think if we can position extension engagement work collectively in this country as a unified group, that we are one of the great solutions to helping reestablish the strength that higher education brings to communities across the country. I think that'll be a great win for us in this country, but I also believe it'd be a great win for us in extension. So I don't shy away from that. Yes, they have greater flexibility, absolutely, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try and figure out a way to be at the forefront of that conversation.
Thank you, Marshall. A question, I'm surprised to hear that the relevance of cooperative extension in rural America is being questioned. How can this misconception be changed? So maybe to all the panel members, if you have a reflection on that.
Chuck, I'll start off with that one if I can, because I think probably I may have tripped it and said that. And I do believe that. I think when you look at, oftentimes people are voting in directions that don't necessarily put us in a stronger position. And what I mean by that is they're voting on ideological pathways, and that's fine. That is certainly, that's fine. That's their right. But they also are the very people who at the same time are fighting to try to keep us money. So it becomes a conflict. And I don't think it's that they don't necessarily connect the dots between public policy and their ideological beliefs and how that comes together. So I think we're in a conundrum right now. The people that love us in rural America, and they do. When I'm out there in Missouri, I can tell you they love us, they eat us up. But sometimes they're not necessarily making decisions that are in the best interest of our funding streams. And so it puts you in a very difficult thing. And I'm not advocating one or the other. I'm just saying that's a reality. And I think it's something we have to be very sensitive to and aware of as we move forward.
Other thoughts on that?
Again, looking at the relevancy and the need of our clientele. I know we're good at staying with programs that we like, that we have a pretty good support system with, but would funding be used more efficiently if it was focused on another area that is of high interest for the people that we are mandated to serve in our communities? Then how are we gleaning the input from our clientele to determine what is it that we can offer you from an extension standpoint that will help you move to a better position, have better communities, healthier families, better economic base? What is it that we can do? Because we know we can't do everything. I think sometimes we've tried to do that, to spread ourselves so thin that we become ineffective. But as long as we are addressing the needs of the community, I think we will continue to get support, but we really have to stand back and look at the big picture. Is the funding that we're using to invest in these really getting us the best for our return?
And I also think for funders in times of scarce resources, it is a lot about a numbers game, the return on investment or the cost per participant. And so we really have to be cognizant of that. I think it's probably true all across the nation, definitely true in Georgia, but our smaller counties a lot of times invest or almost all the time invest a much higher percentage per citizen, than our larger counties do. But we've got to know that, there comes down to sometimes just the reality of there's only so much resources. So we've got to be able to show the high impact for those scarce resources.
Other reactions? So another question, what opportunities does digital delivery of information have to better reaching younger adult audiences, both rural and urban? And how are states changing their information packaging and programming?
I tell you what, getting the millennials to help you plan and come up with some really unique and innovative programming ideas is a great advantage. They have some great ideas. They have a big following from how they address the social media outlet. And we're being able to use programming on those outlets to engage families and doing things together, especially the cooking in nutrition and fitness type of activities, financial management, even in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey and all those, using those avenues to get information out, to share with people where you can go and receive assistance. But all those came as a result of our millennials helping us be a part of the planning strategy.
Chuck, Mike O'Neill here. I would just say that at least for us in a relatively small state, we're being pushed toward some sort of digital curriculum because we just aren't going to get any more people to deliver programs. So the number of bodies that we have today is probably the maximum that we'll have any time from now until the end of time. And as that keeps shrinking, we're faced with our role changing from educators to kind of collectors of knowledge that we can package and send out to people in different ways. And then ultimately, to the kinds of things that Debbie talked about, where we convene groups and we don't even necessarily bring the most information to the table. We just, we pull them together to help solve the problem. So, I mean, it sounds sort of doom and gloom, but we're shifting our roles very quickly because we just don't have the resources to go there anymore. I can't hire an ag agent to put in what would be old counties in Connecticut because we're just no one's ever going to support that. There's just no interest at the state level or at the local level to fund positions to go back into that model. So, we have to use a digital delivery and we have to be better at collecting knowledge and bundling knowledge than we are today.
Chuck, this is Marshall. One of the things that I think might be interesting to people, there's been a lot of work done. I want to give our friends at Penn State University a little shout out there. We were probably one of the first universities that I know of that really went to a new customer experience. And we actually followed that here at the University of Missouri. They were started on it before I got here, but we've just launched our new website and it really falls in line with what you're talking about. If you were to go to MU Extension, you will find that, and it brings you into a customer experience. It's all outwardly facing, and what it does is it customizes the experience and allows the experience. For instance, it builds a clientele profile, so we continue to be able to market and target message certain things to that clientele, whether it's in 4-H or if it's in agriculture or if it's in home gardening or whatever it is, and build a customer experience around that. And I think we're all going to be faced with that. And I think what we have to do is bring our base of stakeholders with us as we go toward that. We don't want to lose our base. We want to bring them with us. So as we go through change, I think it's really important, and we're working hard on that to help people come to an understanding that there's more than one way to learn. and that's hard. That's hard. But I think it's a huge mistake as we do that to disenfranchise people. We don't want to do that. We want to bring more people to the party. So it's hard work, but it's called leadership. And I think that's part of what we have to do in today's time. And I'm not at all doom and gloom. I think it's an exciting time. And I think it's a time that if we handle it right, I think it can really be an extraordinary time for us to reimagine what extension and engagement and outreach really look like in a university setting.
Thank you, Marshall. I did want to go back to something that Mike said and Debbie touched on earlier as one of her 2 points, and it's the partnership and coordination piece. And what does that look like? What is Extension's role? Debbie, could you talk just a little bit more about that? I think that's I would guess our roles are evolving in those kinds of spaces. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. We're, like Mike said, we have, we probably have all the people we're ever going to have in terms of being able to deliver programs, and we're just, we're stretched pretty thin. I think I made that point. And it does seem to me that, especially here in a place like Rhode Island where extension has probably always been small. There are just many different organizations that are out there working, doing, kind of working on some facet of whatever the issue or problem is. And And I really think that that's a place where we could be doing more, where we could be playing that role. We do some of it already, perhaps not as deliberately as we might do. But just in terms of, but I am, of course, in a position where I really must think carefully about how do I mobilize my limited resources, my limited number of people to sort of bring the most value. And that convening sort of activity seems like a great place to put some more emphasis for us in the future. I talked about a strong example of where that's going on right now, and that's not Extension doing that. That's someone else, and we're a part of it. But it does work, and so it makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a strategy I'm gonna try to employ more in the future here in Rhode Island.
Yeah. Great, thank you. We've had a couple of comments, and I think interesting for the panel and perhaps others to reflect on for a few minutes, and that is really about those that advocate for us. Even in rural America, what's the age of our best advocates? We need to think about attracting millennials more strategically. And then a follow-up, Nick talks about how can Extension be proactively building a stronger and non-traditional advocacy base, something they're working on here in Florida. Would be interested in knowing what from the panel if they are doing anything in this area. So think about your advocacy base. What are you doing? What are your thoughts around evolving from maybe adding to our traditional advocacy base?
Well, I think that goes back to people knowing what we do. The best way to create an advocate is to have someone use our programs and our services, have a great experience, and then want to go out and share that. So I think it kind of comes back to that issue of they've got to know who we are, and we've got to do the work to get to know them. That's why we spend so much time and have put so many resources into our urban programs in Georgia, because we didn't have a lot of advocates in the urban area, and we needed to get to know those legislators and those decision makers. And I think it is really hard work, and it's exactly like building those advocates in a rural area. There's just a lot more, it's just a lot harder, a lot more people, a lot more layers to get through.
And it takes time. It takes time for people to understand what we do and to trust us. I'm just very pleased with this new direction our community economic development program is going, to where we were able to recruit so many different partners. As I mentioned, we even have a Catholic church involved in this process. And, there are lots of homeless veterans in Texas, and they cannot get benefits if they don't have a mailing address. And so these temporary homes will be strictly to help them get the benefits they need so that they can move out and get them an apartment or get them a loan and get a home or whatever. So that's a critical need that the community is concerned about. And it's just amazing the different resources and the partners who are calling us, wanting to get on board. We have mayors, we have it's just been amazing. And so again, what are you doing that is relevant and meeting a need in the community will attract the right advocates that are ready to go and get as much as they can to make this a success in the community. And we're hoping to replicate it throughout Texas.
All right, so we've covered a lot of territory this afternoon. We have a few more minutes left. Any other comments or perspectives from anyone? Perhaps online or perhaps our panel, anyone who'd like to jump in?
Well, Chuck, I will address Scott Reed's question about how we work together to take advantage of some of the expertise we have in Extension to increase our likelihood of bringing in some of these federal funds. One of the things we've done in our college is the experiment station director and the extension director have worked together to create pots of innovation grant dollars where multidisciplinary integrated teams can come together and get a little seed money to start on a project that hopefully will end up giving them the preliminary data they need to go and get larger funds, larger funding. And just the process of helping these people get to know each other. One of the things we did right before Christmas is we hosted a Halloween social at a local brewery in Athens, because until they get to know each other, they're never going to work together. And so I tell people all the time, I feel like Match.com for the college. But, you know, just bringing together these multidisciplinary integrated teams, great things happen, but they have to get to know each other so that they'll work together. But we've been trying to incentivize some of that type of programming by taking some of our resources and putting them into supporting these types of activities. And we're already seeing it pay off. We've had a tremendous problem with white flies, and we put together a white fly team that involved researchers, extension specialists, and our agents. Our session starts Monday, and it's looking like the General Assembly is going to give us $250,000 in one-time emergency funding to support that effort. Now, I'll let y'all know if that comes through, but that is kind of what has been promised. But I think they see that these interdisciplinary teams are working, and that it is a good use of resources to support them.
Thank you, Laura. Any other final comments? All right, I'm always sensitive to time, and we've set aside an hour for this conversation. Thank you all who have dialed in today. I'm not sure where room 206 is, but there's a bunch of people in a room watching what we're doing today and engaging with us, and I love that. So welcome room 206. Thank you all for your time today. A special thank you to our panel, Brian, Laura, Debbie, Marshall, and Carolyn, for your great comments, your great insight, and above all, your great ideas to share with all of us. So thank you all. Have a great January, and we will see you again on the first Friday of February at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.